Welcome back to my channel. I'm Selena if you've just found me, and today I'm going to be making 3 or 4, depending on my time, different varieties of Lamingtons. So Lamingtons are a little cake that's covered traditionally in a chocolate sort of icing and then rolled in coconut. Today I'm going to make a couple of variations on my Lamington. One will be the standard chocolate coconut variety that we all know and love, and then I'm going to make 2 others and aim for a 4th, and I'll come bring you along with me as I do that. So to start making Lamingtons, you need a base of a vanilla cake. So a vanilla sponge cake, you can buy that from the supermarket. You can use a cake mix, any vanilla cake will do. Today I don't have any cake mix left, so I'm just going to make a double batch of a vanilla cake really quickly, get it baking, because once you've baked it, you need to cool it down. So I have a large tin here that should fit the double batch in it. If not, I'll do 2 different cakes. And yeah, so we're just gonna get straight into it. I'm going to be making all of the measurements today in grams using digital scales. If you need to get your hands on some digital scales, I'll put a link in my description box down below for an Amazon purchase. That is an affiliate link, just so that you do know. You could also use a measurement converter, and I will make sure one of those is also in my description box. For anyone who's unfamiliar with using grams, I'll make it as simple as I can. I will have a cup converter in there and also a link to some digital scales. But getting straight into it, this recipe is one where we mix our flour with our butter. Instead of creaming sugar and butter together like most cake mixes, this one has the butter, the sugar, and the flour mixed together to create like a sandy texture before we add our wet ingredients of eggs and milk. So in a bowl, we want to measure out some butter, some flour, and some sugar. So I'm going to start with my flour. So I need 240 grams of self-raising flour for a single batch. Because my mixer is just the standard sized KitchenAid, I'm only going to do a single batch at a time. If I can fit 2 in my pan, I'll just do one after the other and mix them together in my baking pan. If not, I'll just do a couple of different baking pans. Either way, we want a slab cake at the end of the day. Okay, so 240 grams of self-raising flour straight into a mixing bowl. If you want to make this with hand beaters as well, you can do that as well. 240. There we go. To that, we are adding 280 grams, 280 grams of white sugar, caster sugar if you have it. Then we want to add straight into this 80 grams of butter. If you want to use margarine, you can. And if you want, you need your butter to be softened. So we don't want it to be really cold for this particular recipe. And just like that, straight onto a mixer with a paddle attachment. Get this combined until it looks a bit like sand. While that's mixing and doing its thing, we're going to prepare our wet ingredients. So in a jug, we want 2 eggs. To the eggs, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla essence, or 2 capfuls. And we also need 240 mils of milk. I'm just using long life milk because I had one partially, well, used, so I had one open. And I'm keeping my fresh milk at the moment because we're running a little low. So any milk is fine. I am also going, I forgot to do this at the beginning, I'm going to change my flour into cake flour. The way to change regular all-purpose flour into cake flour is simply by adding a little bit of corn flour to your regular all-purpose sort of flour. Self-raising flour has already got a raising agent in it. It is just all-purpose regular flour, but in it, it has got about a teaspoon of baking powder per cup of flour. So that's why I used self-raising flour. If you don't have self-raising flour, use plain flour and just add a teaspoon of baking powder per cup of flour, and that was about 2 cups roughly. But you'll know if you use the cup converter down below exactly how many cups that was if you do need to alter plain flour into self-raising. So in addition to that, we're going to add corn flour. Add 2 tablespoons of corn flour. Mixture has come together. It does look like sand already. And it's simply that I forgot to add the corn flour at the beginning, but that's okay. Nothing has changed. We haven't added our wet ingredients yet. This will incorporate as well. Let's turn that back on. Let that mix through till it's well incorporated because we're ready to add our wet ingredients now. I am going to give my eggs and milk just a quick little beat with a fork just to get those eggs mixed into the milk a bit better. And as you can see, my flour mixture is well incorporated now. You can't tell that I forgot that corn flour to begin with. Okay, so we are ready to add our wet ingredients. With the mixer running, just slowly drizzle in your wet ingredients. We want to make sure all of our ingredients have been well incorporated, so I'm just going to give it a quick mix, making sure I get the sides and the base of my bowl. We don't want any flour that's been missed. We're going to give this a quick beat and it is ready. It only takes about 30 seconds of beating. It's not a cake mix. We need to really spend a lot of time beating. We're really just combining these ingredients. And this is definitely going to be able to hold 2 of these cake mixes. And what I need to do, because I've got some exposed cake pan here, my baking paper hasn't come all the way to the top. I'm just going to quickly give that a spray of oil just so that we don't end up with cake stuck. I'm going to repeat the process so that my cake pan is full. I am going to quickly repeat that process to turn this into a double batch of cake. If you had a mixer that had the capacity to do the double at the one time, you don't need to obviously repeat it. But because I don't want to burn out my mixer, and I have a habit of doing that because I overwork my machines, so I'm trying to be a lot more gentle on what I have. So I'm going to go in, just quickly pull this next batch of cake batter together, and I'll bring you back when we're up to baking. All right, that's our second cake batter done. So my oven is set to 180 degrees Celsius, and I'll make sure I make a link or mention down below somewhere what that is in Fahrenheit for those of you who need that information. This is ready to go in the oven. It's going to take anywhere from 20 minutes to sort of 45 minutes. You're going to need to keep an eye on it. It's going to get nice and fluffy and tall, hopefully. So we will get that cooked, get that baked, and then I will bring you back when we get that out of the oven. While that's baking, we can prepare our toppings, I guess you'd call them, or our icings for the Lamingtons. So I'm going to put this in the oven. Okay. So what I've gone ahead and done is my cake has come out of the oven. I've let it cool on a cooling rack for about 15 minutes, and then I've popped the whole thing in the freezer. I've also gone ahead and made another double batch of my cake batter, and it is currently in the oven now. So I will end up with 2 of those big Lamington tin sized cakes, which is a 4 batch of my cake batter. So down below in the description box, I will make sure I make a note of all of that for you so that you can make as little or as much as I am today if that's something you're wanting to do. So you'll see how many of these Lamingtons I get, and I've got the 4 different varieties all set out. I wasn't sure if I was going to have time to do all 4, but I'm going to make the time to show you 4 different delicious Lamington varieties. And you will know that if you want to make everything that I make today, the quantities will be listed below, as well as just the single batch. So you're able to sort of work out what works best for you. So while I have my second cake is cooking in the oven, my first cake is in my freezer, we're going to start getting some of the other bits and pieces ready. I will also say, if you pre-plan to make your Lamingtons and can make your cake the day before you go to coat them, that will result in a better Lamington. So the cake fresh out of the oven is going to be really soft and quite hard for me to work with. If I had have made my cake yesterday, it would be significantly easier because all the little cake crumbs won't be trying to fall off because it's so soft and fresh. So keep that in mind. Whether you buy a cake or you make the cake yourself, try and have it made one day before. If that's not an option, pop it in the freezer, because that's the other thing that's going to make coating my Lamingtons today much easier, is the fact that they will be cold. Okay, so if you can get them into the fridge, you can get them into the freezer. That's going to help when it comes to try to coat your Lamingtons. So while all that's happening, we are going to start getting bits and pieces ready for the 4 different flavors. And the first flavor is going to be the standard Lamington, which is coated in a chocolate sauce and then rolled in coconut. So what I've got here is a large shallow dish and some desiccated coconut. Okay, I'm not doing anything to this coconut. I'm not toasting it or anything like that. Lamingtons traditionally are not a toasted coconut thing. So I am going to generously fill this dish because 2 of my flavors are going to be rolled in coconut. So my chocolate one, I will also be making, so one of the flavors I will also be making today is going to be the jelly cake variety, which is sometimes just sold as like a pink Lamington, but it is technically just a jelly cake. And to coat the jelly cake, we will need some jelly, and I've got a raspberry flavor here. So the jelly cake variety will go into the jelly and then into the coconut. So that's why I did dish out quite a large amount of coconut. Lamingtons do soak up a fair bit of coconut as well, so be prepared to have coconut available to do that. Another flavor I'm going to do today is going to be a fairy bread flavor. I just feel like it's an Australian favorite, fairy bread. We love our fairy bread down here. So we're going to do a fairy bread flavor, and for that, you're going to need hundreds and thousands or sprinkles, depending on what you prefer. I have got hundreds and thousands. So hundreds and thousands, if you're unaware, they are those little tiny balls that end up on cupcakes and things like that, okay? Fairy bread is a really simple thing. It's just white bread. We put a heavy coating of butter or margarine on it, and then we coat that in our sprinkles, or hundreds and thousands. So I'm going to make a vanilla glaze for the outside, the coating component, and then we're going to roll those lamingtons in our hundreds and thousands. So I need to prepare that by simply opening my packet. So I have got 2 packets here, but I'm unsure if it's going to require 2 whole packets. So in a plate sort of that's dished, so it's got a side on it, I'm just going to pour 1 whole packet of my hundreds and thousands. And set them aside. I will just keep these over to the side in case I need them. So I'll put those with my coconut. The 4th flavour that I'm making today is going to be the 4th flavour I want to make today, I want to steal from Biscoff, okay? I'm thinking vanilla cake, a Biscoff coated glaze sort of thing, and then some crumbed Biscoff style cookies. I was going to buy Biscoff cookies or biscuits, and I realised that I actually still had some of my European spiced cookies left from Christmas, so this is a perfect way to use up things that you might have had left from Christmas. So I have got some of these. All I'm going to do is process them into a nice fine crumb. The glaze that will go on the Biscoff style Lamington is going to be the vanilla glaze as well, but I'm going to put some of the cookie spread in it. So you can buy Biscoff brand cookie spread. This is an alternative brand, but it is the same product, it's just a little cheaper, and I did get this one from Woolworths. This particular biscuits, they were from Aldi, and they were part of the Christmas stock, but I do believe you can get something similar at Aldi most of the year, and you can always get Biscoff from any of your major supermarkets as well. So we're going to put some of this cookie spread into our vanilla glaze, and that will be the coating to the 4th variety. So what I need to do is start off by getting my biscuits or my cookies crumbed into a nice fine crumb, and all I'm going to do is use my food processor, kitchen machine, blender, whatever you've got. You can use a rolling pin and like a Ziploc bag and just bash them down. We just need to get these into a crumb texture. And I'm going to use, I don't know, a good handful of these biscuits. I won't crumb all of them because I can use what's left for something else at a later date. Okay, that's looking good. As you can see, we're just a nice fine crumb, and I'm just going to put that straight into another bowl, and that is ready then for when we go to coat our cakes. So my kettle has just boiled. It's time for me to get the glaze done for the jelly cake Lamington, because this one needs to cool down a little bit before we actually dip our cake into it. So it's really simple. We want 1 packet of jelly in a heat-proof bowl, 1 packet of jelly, and you can make this whatever color you like by buying whatever jelly you like. And we want to add about 200 mils of boiling water to our jelly. And we will let this then cool down so that it's not quite so hot. Once your jelly crystals are all dissolved, just set your jelly aside. That needs to cool down before we can dip any of our cake into that. I won't be making any of the other flavoured glazes yet, not until we're ready to start dipping. If you make your glazes too early in advance, you'll have to reheat them to bring them back to a nice liquid consistency, because they will start to set up once they are made. So we're going to work through one flavour at a time, and depending on how our timing goes, whether our cake is ready and cool enough for us to work with, if the jelly is ready at the same time, we'll just start with that one. If it is not ready, if the jelly is too hot still, we will make our chocolate glaze and move on and do that one first. Okay, so my cake has come out of the oven. It is not out of the freezer. It's nice and cold. I've popped my other cake into the freezer now, so that by the time we're finished working with this one, that one should be ready, cooled down, ready to work with. All right, so what we need to do is cut our cakes up, make our glaze that we're going to start with, and then get going on making the Lamington. So for my cake, because I am doing 4 different flavours today, I'm going to cut this in half, just eyeball it somewhere close to half. And it is okay that you have crunchy outsides if you've cooked your cake a little longer or it's started to go a little brown. That is okay, because it's actually going to hold up with the dunking in the glaze a little bit better than if it was super soft. So I actually like it when that happens. All right. Now, Lamingtons are traditionally sort of, I don't know, what's that, 2 inches by 2 inches. But today you can make them any size you like. I'm going to cut each of my slabs, so each batch or flavour, 3 this way, and then probably 4. Of course, you can make them smaller, you can make them bigger, whatever works for you. That one there is the perfect example of your Lamington. It's nice and fluffy and tall, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with these smaller ones either. So each batch is going to give us about 12 Lamingtons. Don't worry if you find yourself, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, that is a lot of Lamingtons. These are freezable, okay? So once you have made your Lamingtons, you can pop them in the freezer in a zip bag and then pull them out, pop them in those school lunch boxes or work lunches, and they are perfect by the time you go to eat them. They'll come up to room temperature. Now you can also have a Lamington that is filled with cream and jam, and they are divine. You have 2 options when it comes to doing that. You can fill them with cream and jam now, pop them in the freezer so that the outside edge where the cream is has a chance to set, or you can fill them with jam and cream after they're completed, just before you go to serve them. So if you're wanting to put jam and cream in your Lamingtons, there are 2 ways to do that, and that is entirely up to you. I'm just going to be making these ones today, and when we go to serve them on the weekend, we will probably just have jam and cream available for those people. For our chocolate glaze, so I'm just going to start with about 300 grams of icing sugar. To that, you want to add a little bit of cocoa. So I've got a couple of tablespoons of cocoa. All right, to that, we want some butter, and it's about a tablespoon of butter. Then you want to add some milk. And you're going to need about 2/3 of a cup of milk, or half of that, about 1/3 of a cup of milk, and about 1/3 of a cup of hot water. If you don't use hot water and you just use milk, you'll need to heat your glaze up in the microwave or over a double boiler so that the butter melts and the glaze becomes nice and runny. I like to use a combination of the butter, of the milk and the hot water. I find that it has the ability obviously to melt our butter and make our glaze nice and runny, but we still get the nice richness that comes from the milk, and it isn't such a watery flavouring in the chocolate. You do want your glaze to be rather thin. It's quite a watery thing. It's not like frosting a cake, so you're not looking for an icing that would hold itself up if you were to pour it on a cake. It does need to be really thin. You're also wanting to definitely have all the lumps removed. So I'm starting off with a spoon, but I will end up bringing a little tiny whisk out just to make sure I get all of the butter and any lumps of cocoa or icing sugar well and truly incorporated. And if you need to, pop your bowl in the microwave for 30 seconds just to really get everything melted well together. You don't need your glaze to be hot, but you do need everything to be well and truly melted into each other. So I'm going to give that 30 seconds in the microwave, and then I'll bring the whisk out and I'll also give that a quick whisk. So our chocolate glazes have 30 seconds in the microwave just to make sure that butter is going to melt nicely. I've got all my cake has been cut. Well, all of the first whole cake has been cut into the 2 different batches. Making lamingtons is a little bit messy, so be prepared for a little bit of mess. Okay, nice and smooth, perfect. Just how we want it. A nice smooth glaze, but quite runny, quite liquid. All right, next what we want to do, you need to get yourself prepared. So here's our coconut, here's our cake, there's our chocolate sauce. I've got a couple of forks here. I'm going to be using forks to dip, and I also have a plate to put the finished product on, okay? So just like dipping anything that you would, you do need to work pretty quickly in that the cake is going to absorb this liquid glaze really quite quickly. So we don't want it entirely soaked. Just like that. Get your coconut on top and all of the sides. Well covered in coconut. You don't want any wet chocolate bits. There you go. First lamington ready to go. Over to the side. And it's up to you if you pierce like I did with the fork. It does seem to help a little bit. You do need to coat the entire lamington in the glaze, otherwise the coconut's not going to stick. But you don't want it in there for too long because you don't want the entire lamington coated like all the way through with the chocolate. Perfect lamington. Look at that. It smells so good. It smells lovely and chocolatey. And I'm just going to keep working through. I've only got these 4, so this one and 3 more to go, and then the chocolate batch is done. Okay, so my chocolate Lamingtons are done. There we go, we got all 12. I do have some glaze left and I do have this coconut. Now I did intend originally to use the coconut for both the jelly and the chocolate Lamington, but I do have a little bit of chocolate bits in there. So you can either try and pick those out, you can leave them in there and let your jelly ones have a little bit of chocolate on them as well, or you can pop that in a freezer bag for the next time you want to make Lamingtons and just use that coconut instead of fresh coconut. All right, so I've popped those chocolate ones straight in the fridge. They don't need to be stored in the fridge. I'm just putting them in the fridge because it's a hot day here today. And I have checked, my jelly is sort of room temperature, so that's a good working temperature. And I've got fresh coconut here. I'll end up putting my coconut in a zip bag and in the freezer. My family enjoy Lamingtons quite regularly, so I'm happy to just store that for the next time I want to make them. I'd rather do that than throw out my ingredients when there's nothing wrong with them. So in exactly the same way, we're going to dunk our cake in our jelly, making sure we get all the sides covered, straight into our coconut. And there you have it, a lovely pink Lamington. And I'm just going to keep working through all of my cake until we are finished and we have all of our squares covered in jelly, covered in coconut, and then these will go in the fridge. The jelly will then obviously set, and yeah, it will be a lovely raspberry flavoured Lamington. By the time I've finished these, the cake that's in the freezer, it should have cooled down enough for me to cut it and work with it, so that I can then make the last two flavours before I show you everything at the end. And there we have pink Lamingtons. I'll pop those in the fridge and I'll check on the cake that I have in the freezer. And if my cake that's in the freezer is ready to go, I will work straight away and make that vanilla glaze. If it's not quite there, I'll bring you back in just a moment. Okay, so our cake is ready to come out of the freezer and we can start our two vanilla glazed Lamingtons, one which will end up being fairy bread and the other one we will add that Biscoff or cookie spread to. So what we're going to do is make one of the vanilla glazes, we'll make our fairy bread Lamingtons, and then we will top up that glaze to add the Biscoff spread for doing the Biscoff Lamingtons. That way we're not wasting ingredients. If we end up having some of our vanilla glaze left over and we don't end up using it all when we make our fairy bread Lamingtons, we will at least not be wasting it. We can just add to it, make some more, okay? And then we'll add the spread to that. So our vanilla glaze is going to be exactly like the chocolate glaze in that it is going to be about 300 roughly grams of icing sugar. Or thereabouts. You kind of can gauge this yourself a little bit. This time we want to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla, or capfuls in this case. We want about a tablespoon of butter. I'm adding a little more butter this time, simply because we want it to have the fairy bread flavour. We want the butter flavour in there. We want people to think, oh, this is fairy bread, okay? We don't want it to just taste like vanilla glaze. So a little more butter is good. We're going to add milk. That's only about 2 tablespoons there. So we'll add some hot water, and I'll just add a little more milk. I'll pop that in the microwave, give that 30 seconds, and then give it a good whisk. So there's our vanilla glaze. All I did was microwave that and give it a good whisk, get it well incorporated. I am going to add just a little more icing sugar, because if you'll remember, the chocolate one did have the cocoa powder in it, so that did thicken it slightly to get the right consistency. The consistency you're looking for is just slightly runnier than pouring cream, okay? There needs to be a little bit of resistance. We don't want this to be the same consistency as just plain water, but we do want it to be not too thick either. If it's too thick, if your glazes are too thick when you go to make lamingtons, what ends up happening is you end up having too much of that in the cake layer, and then it's a little hard to eat, okay? So that's why the consistency is what matters, in that you just want slightly thicker than, well, thicker than water, but a little less than thickened cream, pouring cream consistency. That's good. It's got a little bit of something to it without being too thick. Okay, and just exactly the same as before. We've got our sprinkles, or hundreds and thousands. We've got our glaze. I just need to cut the cake into all the pieces, and I'm just going to trim the edge off of this one, just because it was a little more overcooked than the last one. And that's the other thing you can do if you want to cut off the edges and have no crunchy bits at all. Again, entirely up to you. Okay, exactly the same as we did before. In our glaze, into your sprinkles. This one is a little bit harder to manage because sprinkles don't absorb the same way that coconut does. So just keep that in mind. If you do make all of the varieties, this one is slightly different in its feel, but there you go. Beautiful fairy bread, Lamington. If you are freezing these Lamingtons as well, the fairy bread ones are likely to have the colours run from the sprinkles. Keep that in mind. This one doesn't freeze as well as the ones that have the coconut on them, but still, they'll be fine. They just will have the running of the colours. Especially if you use sprinkles instead of hundreds and thousands. And I'll show you, there we go. I'm going to keep working through all of my Lamington squares, getting these coated, and then I'll bring you back for the last flavour, and then I'll show you all of them all together. There are our fairy bread Lamingtons. Okay, I did run out of the sprinkles, so I've got 2 left here. I'll just do them in a different flavour. But there we go, into the fridge. Okay, so I did end up with 2 extra pieces of cake because I didn't quite have enough packets of sprinkles. So if you would like to make exactly what I'm doing here today, grab yourself 3 packets of sprinkles. It will be more, or hundreds and thousands, it will be more than enough. I will end up dipping those 2 in either the chocolate one, because I do still have that out and there was plenty of that left, or this Biscoff style one if I have enough of that one. So I've had a quick taste of the Biscoff spread. I wanted to see how strong it was. Because it's not the Biscoff brand that I'm used to using, at least I can sort of gauge how much of this are we going to need. I've also fished out any little hundreds and thousands that have gotten lost in my glaze along the way. There is a little bit of cake crumbs in here, but that's okay because all it's really going to do is act as a bit of a binding agent. We are going to now whisk in some of our spread, and that's about a good heaped tablespoon. And for the amount that I've got left, which is about half the amount of the glaze, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon. So if you're just making the Biscoff one and you're wanting to make this glaze, make that recipe, the one that I made for the fairy bread, and just add 2 tablespoons of your spread to it, okay? We can always add more of this Biscoff spread. Oh, I've got some hundreds and thousands in the bottom. I guess we're going to end up with a few hundreds and thousands through our Biscoff one. I thought I'd gotten them all, but I hadn't. Give that a good mix. If it needs to be watered down a little more, just add a little bit of boiling water until it comes to the consistency that we're looking for. That isn't too far. It's a little thick. I'll add a little bit of water to that, but yeah, that's pretty close, to be honest. Okay, so I've added about a tablespoon of water. That's a better consistency. That's what we're going for. Take that out. And there you have it, a Biscoff Lamington. Who would have thought that we would be able to have something so incredible? There you go. I'm going to keep going, working through all of my cakes. If I have run out at all, I will finish off any that are left just with the chocolate coconut, the standard Lamington that we all know and love. But I do think we may have found a new favourite in this house with the Biscoff one, just quietly, just between you and me and the tree. I think that we have, yeah, this is going to be a popular one. All right, friends, there we go. Lamingtons galore. We've got our Biscoff Lamingtons. We've got our fairy bread Lamingtons. the raspberry jelly cake Lamingtons, and of course everyone's favourite, the good old chocolate Lamington. There you go, friends. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you have a fantastic Australia Day if you're in Australia and you're celebrating. And I hope you enjoy Lamingtons. Feel free to have a look down below in the description box for today's recipes, and let me know if you do give them a try and what you think. Is it the first time you've ever had a Lamington? Which one is your favourite flavour? And I will catch you next time. Have a fantastic week. See you later. Before I go, let me show you real quick, if you want to serve these with jam and cream or just cream, you just need to cut them open and pop some cream in the middle. I'll show you how they have soaked. So you can see we've got a pretty even layer of our glaze to cake. That looks good. That's how you want it to look, just like that. If you want to serve it with a bit of cream, just like that, sandwich it back together. You can put jam on as well, and there you go. Delicious, so good. It's not even going to cut, it's so soft and incredible. But there you go, there's your cream in the middle as well. I'm going to finish off this one right here. They taste divine. They are so good, better than any bought Lamingtons I've ever had. And I haven't even started on these extra flavours yet. They freeze perfectly. Give them a try. And thank you for watching.